I gave my parents a luxurious one-week trip to Europe with me when I picked them up to go to the My Name is Delia. I just turned 35 last month. After years of climbing the corporate ladder, I finally reached a point where I could give back to my parents in a meaningful way. I saved for months to surprise them with a luxury European vacation. Then came that morning, standing in their driveway, suitcase in hand. My heart shattered when Mom said those words that still echo in my mind. If you have ever planned something special for someone you love, only to feel that sting of rejection, I would love to know where you are watching from. Please hit subscribe and like this video if you have ever felt underappreciated by family. Now let me take you through what happened next. I grew up in a modest home in Kansas City. Our neighborhood wasn't fancy, but it was safe and filled with families similar to ours. My parents, Janet and Frank, worked hard to provide us with a comfortable life. Dad was an accountant at a local firm, while Mom taught third grade at the elementary school a few blocks from our house. From my earliest memories, I felt the weight of my parents' expectations. "Delia, with your brains, you could be anything," my mom would say while checking my homework. "We expect great things from you," my dad would add during dinner conversations about my future. Their expectations weren't malicious, but they were constant companions throughout my childhood. Everything changed when my sister Sarah was born when I was 7. She arrived 6 weeks premature and spent her first month in the NICU. Those early health scares created a pattern that would define our family dynamic for decades to come. Sarah became the fragile one, the child who needed extra care, extra attention, and extra love. I still remember the night I won first place in the regional science fair. I rushed home, trophy in hand, bursting with excitement to share my achievement, but when I walked through the door, the house was empty. Sarah had developed a fever, and my parents had rushed her to the emergency room. My trophy sat alone on the kitchen counter while I made myself dinner from leftovers in the refrigerator. When they finally returned home well past midnight, Mom patted my head absently and said, "That is nice, honey," before collapsing into bed. My science triumph became a footnote in a day marked by another Sarah emergency. This pattern repeated throughout my school years. My accomplishments were expected while Sarah was celebrated for the smallest achievements. When I brought home straight A's, Dad would nod approvingly and say, "That is what we expect from you." When Sarah managed to pull a C in math after nearly failing, they took her out for ice cream to celebrate. By high school, I had learned to be self-sufficient. While other teenagers rebelled, I doubled down on achievement. I joined every academic club, played volleyball, and maintained a perfect GPA. I stayed busy partly to build my college applications, but mostly to avoid coming home to a house where I always felt like an afterthought. My hard work paid off when I received a partial scholarship to Columbia University. It wasn't enough to cover everything, but it was my ticket out of Kansas City and into a world where I could define myself beyond being the reliable daughter who didn't need attention. "You are going all the way to New York?" my mom had asked when I showed them the acceptance letter. "That is so far away. Are you sure you wouldn't prefer somewhere closer to home?" "I will be fine, Mom," I had assured her. "This is an amazing opportunity." Dad looked concerned about the finances. "We have been saving for college, but with Sarah's medical bills last year," his voice trailed off. "I know," I said quickly. "I have applied for additional scholarships, and I plan to work part-time. I can handle this." The relief on their faces told me everything I needed to know. They wouldn't have to choose between my education and Sarah's needs because I had already chosen for them. College was a revelation. For the first time, I was judged solely on my own merits. No comparisons, no split attention. I worked 3 jobs to make ends meet, mornings at a coffee shop near campus, evenings at the university library, and weekends babysitting for a professor's children. It was exhausting, but I was determined to make it work. Meanwhile, back home, Sarah struggled through high school. She dropped out during her senior year, claiming school was too stressful. My parents never pushed her to return. Instead, they supported her as she cycled through a series of entry-level jobs, quitting each one when it became too difficult or boring. After graduation, I landed a job at a digital marketing agency in Manhattan. The starting salary wasn't impressive, but it offered growth potential. I rented a tiny studio apartment in Brooklyn and began building my life. I called home every Sunday, listening to updates about Sarah's latest crisis: a boyfriend who broke her heart, a boss who didn't appreciate her, a roommate who betrayed her trust. "She just needs more time to find her path," Mom would say defensively when I suggested Sarah might benefit from some professional guidance or structure. "Not everyone can be as naturally driven as you, Delia," Dad would add, as though my success was merely a personality trait rather than the result of years of hard work and sacrifice. As my career progressed, the geographic distance between us grew into an emotional one as well. I visited for major holidays, sending gifts for birthdays and anniversaries I couldn't attend in person. Each visit home followed the same pattern: initial warmth followed by days revolving around Sarah's current drama. By my early 30s, I had climbed to a senior director position. My financial stability allowed me to help my parents, occasionally sending money when their roof needed repairs or when their car broke down. I never mentioned these contributions during our weekly calls, and they never acknowledged them beyond a quick thank you text. Sarah, now 28, continued to live in a state of perpetual crisis. She had moved back home temporarily 3 years ago after being evicted from her apartment. The temporary arrangement had become permanent, with my parents covering her expenses while she worked part-time at a local boutique, a job she complained about constantly but made no effort to change. Despite everything, I longed for a closer relationship with my family. I wanted them to see me, to really see the woman I had become, not just the self-sufficient daughter who didn't need their attention. This longing would ultimately lead me to plan what I thought would be the perfect gift: a chance to reconnect and create new memories together. The day my life changed started like any other. I sat in my corner office, overlooking the Manhattan skyline, reviewing quarterly marketing projections, when my boss Amanda called me in for an unexpected meeting. "Delia, you have been an incredible asset to this company." She began, her usual businesslike demeanor softened by a rare smile. "The board and I have been discussing the future of our leadership team, and we unanimously agree that you are ready for more responsibility." My heart raced as she continued. "We would like to offer you the position of Vice President of Global Marketing Strategy. This comes with a substantial salary increase, expanded benefits, and, of course, more responsibility." The promotion I had been working toward for years had finally materialized. The salary increase was significant, nearly doubling my already comfortable income. As I walked back to my office in a daze of excitement, my thoughts immediately turned to my parents. They had never visited me in New York. Dad always complained about the cost, the crowds, the logistics. Mom worried about leaving Sarah for too long. I had stopped inviting them years ago, tired of the gentle rejections wrapped in practical excuses. But now, with this unexpected windfall, I could bring a piece of my world to them. Or better yet, I could show them a world neither of us had experienced before. The idea hit me with surprising clarity: a European vacation. Not just any trip, but the kind of luxury experience they would never splurge on for themselves. That night, I began researching. Europe had always been a distant dream for my parents. Dad kept a coffee table book about Italian villages that he flipped through on quiet Sunday afternoons. Mom collected refrigerator magnets with landmarks she hoped to see someday: the Eiffel Tower, the Colosseum, Sagrada Familia. I decided on a 1-week itinerary: 3 nights in Paris, 2 in Rome, and 2 in Barcelona. I would spare no expense. Business class flights, 5-star hotels, private tours and reservations at Michelin-starred restaurants. This would be the trip of a lifetime. Over the next few weeks, I spent my evenings planning every detail. I worked with a luxury travel agent who specialized in customized European tours. "This is quite the generous gift," she commented during one of our planning sessions. "Your parents must be very special." "They are," I replied, automatically pushing away the complicated feelings that lurked beneath that simple statement. For the Paris leg, I booked a suite at a historic hotel with views of the Eiffel Tower. I arranged for a private, after-hours tour of the Louvre, a dinner cruise on the Seine, and a day trip to Versailles with a historian as guide. In Rome, they would stay in a converted palazzo near the Spanish Steps with a private tour of the Vatican and a cooking class with a renowned local chef. Barcelona would include a guided architectural tour focused on Gaudi's masterpieces and a day trip to a family-owned vineyard in the countryside. The total cost came to just over $15,000, a significant sum even with my new salary. But each time I hesitated over the expense, I imagined the look on their faces when I revealed the surprise. Finally, they would see that I had become someone successful, someone who could provide extraordinary experiences. Maybe then they would look at me with the same pride they reserve for Sarah's smallest accomplishments. As the departure date approached, I grew increasingly excited. I created a beautiful leather-bound album containing all the details of the trip, flight, confirmations, hotel reservations, tour descriptions, and restaurant bookings. I included photographs of each destination and personal notes about why I had selected each experience. The final touch was a handwritten letter expressing my gratitude for all they had sacrificed to give me a good start in life. I called home on a Wednesday evening, my heart pounding as I waited for someone to answer. "Delia, is everything okay?" Mom sounded concerned, unaccustomed to midweek calls. "Everything is great, actually. I have some exciting news I would like to share in person. I was thinking of flying home this weekend if that works for you and Dad." "This weekend?" She sounded surprised. "Well, I suppose that would be fine. Sarah has plans on Saturday night, but we will be home." "Is it good news, I hope?" "Yes, very good news," I assured her. "I will book my flight and let you know the details." And that Friday, I flew to Kansas City, the leather album tucked safely in my carry-on bag. I had requested time off for the trip itself, arranging to work remotely for a few days before their departure to tie up loose ends. Everything was falling into place. As I drove the familiar route from the airport to my childhood home, I allowed myself to imagine their reaction. Would they cry? Would they be speechless with gratitude? Would this finally be the moment they saw me? Truly saw me, not just as the daughter who didn't need them, but as someone worthy of their admiration. I pulled into the driveway of the modest two-story house where I grew up, took a deep breath, and grabbed the album from the passenger seat. It was time to give them the surprise of a lifetime. Mom opened the door before I could knock, wrapping me in a perfumed hug that smelled of the same department store fragrance she had worn throughout my childhood. "Delia, you look so professional," she said, holding me at arm's length to inspect my appearance. "New York certainly agrees with you." Dad appeared behind her, offering his usual greeting, a brief hug, and an awkward pat on the shoulder. "The traffic wasn't too bad from the airport, I hope." "Not bad at all," I replied, following them into the living room that looked exactly as it had during my last visit. The same floral couch, the same family photos on the wall, most featuring Sarah at various ages. "I made your favorite for dinner," Mom announced proudly. "Pot roast with those red potatoes you always liked." The gesture touched me. Perhaps they were more excited about my visit than they let on. "Sarah will join us later," Dad added. "She had to work until 6. Dinner was pleasant, filled with comfortable conversation about neighbors, relatives, and local happenings. I shared sanitized stories about New York, carefully edited to remove any hints of stress or loneliness that might worry them. As Mom served her signature apple pie for dessert, the front door opened and Sarah breezed in. She looked tired, her blonde hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, dark circles under her eyes. "Delia, I didn't think you would be here already, she exclaimed, giving me a quick side hug before collapsing into the empty chair at the table. Today was absolutely brutal. The new manager is such a nightmare. Just like that, the conversation shifted. Sarah launched into a detailed account of her workplace grievances, while Mom made sympathetic noises and Dad asked pointed questions about the manager's competence. I sat quietly, the leather album resting on my lap beneath the table, waiting for an appropriate moment to redirect the conversation. When Sarah finally paused for breath, I seized my opportunity. I actually have some exciting news to share with everyone, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. That is why I wanted to come home this weekend. All eyes turned to me. You are not moving even further away, are you? Mom asked, her brow furrowing with concern. No, nothing like that, I assured her. Actually, I recently received a significant promotion at work. I am now the Vice President of Global Marketing Strategy. That sounds important, Dad said clearly, trying to understand what the title meant. It is, I confirmed. It comes with a substantial salary increase and more responsibility. Well, congratulations, Mom said, reaching over to pat my hand. We always knew you would do well. Sarah shifted in her seat. That is great, Delia. Some people have all the luck when it comes to bosses who actually recognize talent. I ignored the implicit comparison and reached for the album in my lap. The promotion isn't actually my news. It is what the promotion allowed me to do. I placed the leather-bound book on the table. This is for you and Dad. Mom looked confused as she accepted the album. What is this? Open it and see. I encouraged, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure they could hear it. Dad moved his chair closer to Mom's as she carefully opened the cover. Their expressions shifted from curiosity to confusion to astonishment as they turned each page. Delia, Mom whispered, her fingers tracing the image of the Eiffel Tower. Is this what I think it is? If you think it is a one-week trip to Europe, then yes, I replied, unable to contain my smile. Paris, Rome, and Barcelona, business-class flights, luxury hotels, private tours. Everything is arranged and paid for. All you need to do is pack your bags. We leave next Saturday. Dad looked up, his eyes wide. This must have cost a fortune. Do not worry about that, I said quickly. The important thing is that we will finally have the chance to experience these amazing places together. Oh, Delia. Mom breathed, tears welling in her eyes. I don't know what to say. For one perfect moment, I saw what I had been seeking all these years, pure, undiluted appreciation directed solely at me. They were seeing me, truly seeing me. Then Sarah's phone rang. Sorry, I need to take this, she muttered, stepping into the kitchen. Through the doorway, I could see her pacing her free hand, gesticulating wildly as she spoke in an urgent whisper. Mom and Dad continued to flip through the album, exclaiming over the hotels and restaurants I had selected. I explained the itinerary, pointing out special experiences I had arranged based on interests they had expressed over the years. I can't believe you remembered my fascination with Roman architecture, Dad said, genuinely touched as he examined the private Vatican tour description. And this cooking class in Rome, Mom added. You know how I have always wanted to learn authentic Italian cooking. Their excitement was everything I had hoped for. For once, I was the daughter who had done something extraordinary, something worthy of their full attention and appreciation. Sarah returned to the dining room, her eyes red-rimmed. Sorry about that, she said, slumping back into her chair. Just more drama with Jason. He wants to get back together after everything he put me through. Mom immediately turned her attention to Sarah. Oh, honey, what did you tell him? I said I needed time to think, Sarah replied, running a hand through her hair. But honestly, this job is killing me, and now this emotional roller coaster with Jason. I feel like I cannot catch a break lately. I noticed my parents exchanging a glance, a silent communication honed by decades of marriage. My stomach tightened instinctively. "This trip looks absolutely amazing, Delia," Dad said, returning his attention to the album, but with noticeably less enthusiasm. "We have a week to prepare," you said. "Yes," I confirmed. "I will come pick you up next Saturday morning. Our flight leaves at 2 p.m., so we should leave here around 10:30 to allow plenty of time at the airport." Mom nodded, but her eyes kept drifting to Sarah, who was now scrolling through her phone with a miserable expression. "Well, we should celebrate your big news," Dad declared, rising to fetch a bottle of wine from the kitchen. "This is quite the surprise." We toasted my promotion and the upcoming trip, but the perfect moment had passed. The conversation kept circling back to Sarah's work troubles and relationship drama. By the time I left that evening, the album that had been the center of attention just hours before sat forgotten on the coffee table. Still, I drove back to my hotel with a sense of cautious optimism. They had been genuinely excited about the trip. In a week's time, we would be flying to Paris together, creating new memories far away from the familiar patterns that defined our relationship. This would be the fresh start I had been hoping for. The week passed in a blur of anticipation and preparation. I checked and double-checked all our reservations, downloaded travel apps to my phone, and packed a carefully selected wardrobe suitable for Europe in the spring. I called my parents twice during the week to answer questions about packing and to confirm our departure details. Each conversation was brief but pleasant, fueling my growing excitement about the trip. On Saturday morning, I woke early, too anxious to sleep. I dressed carefully in comfortable travel clothes, loaded my suitcase into my rental car, and headed to my parents' house, arriving precisely at 10:30 as planned. The scene that greeted me as I pulled into their driveway stopped me cold. My sister's beat-up Honda was parked out front, its trunk open and half filled with suitcases. Sarah stood beside it, struggling to fit another bag into the limited space. I sat in my car for a long moment, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. A knot formed in my stomach as I finally stepped out and approached my sister. "Sarah, what is going on? Are you driving Mom and Dad to the airport?" Sarah looked up, her expression a mix of guilt and defiance. "Oh, Delia, I thought Mom called you yesterday." "Called me about what?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Before Sarah could respond, our parents emerged from the house, each rolling a suitcase behind them. Mom faltered when she saw me, her smile fading. "Delia, you're here. I meant to call you," she said, her voice high and unnaturally bright. "What is happening?" I asked, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. Dad cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Well, honey, we have been talking, and there has been a slight change of plans." "What kind of change?" I pressed through the suitcases being loaded into Sarah's car, told me everything I needed to know. Mom stepped forward, placing a hand on my arm. "Your sister has been going through such a difficult time lately. You know about the situation with Jason, and yesterday she lost her job. The boutique is closing, and she is just devastated." I waited, saying nothing, forcing them to actually speak the words. "We thought that maybe this trip could be good for her," Mom continued. "A chance to clear her head and get a fresh perspective. You are always so strong and independent, Delia. Sarah needs this opportunity more than you do right now." The words hit me like a physical blow. I stared at my mother, this woman who had once again looked at her two daughters and decided which one deserved care and attention. "So you are taking Sarah to Europe instead of me," I stated flatly. Dad stepped forward. "It is not that we don't appreciate what you have done. This gift is incredibly generous. We just think Sarah could really benefit from getting away right now." "I lost my job, Delia," Sarah added, as though I might have missed that crucial detail. "And Jason and I are definitely over this time. I have been crying for days." "I see," I said, my voice hollow. "And who exactly is paying for Sarah's airline ticket? Because the ones I purchased are in my name and Mom and Dad's names." Mom brightened. "That is what I was going to call you about. We were hoping you might be able to transfer your ticket to Sarah's name. Or if that is not possible, perhaps you could purchase one for her. With your new promotion and all, it would probably be easier for you than for us." I stood perfectly still, absorbing the full impact of what was happening. They had not only decided to exclude me from a trip I had planned and paid for, but they expected me to finance my own replacement. "Your sister really needed some rest." Mom smiled, squeezing my arm. "So we decided to take her instead." I felt something shift inside me, a fundamental realignment of my understanding of my place in this family. All those years of striving for approval, of making myself smaller to accommodate Sarah's needs, of accepting scraps of attention with gratitude, crystallized in this moment of breathtaking thoughtlessness. Without a word, I walked back to my rental car, opened the glove compartment, and removed a folder containing printed copies of all the travel documents. I returned to my bewildered family and silently handed the folder to my father. "Everything you need is in here," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Flight confirmations, hotel reservations, tour details. The concierge at each hotel has my credit card information for incidentals. You will not need to pay for anything that has already been arranged." "Delia, honey, we know you must be disappointed." Mom began, her expression finally registering some concern about my reaction. "I need to go," I interrupted, turning back toward my car. "Have a wonderful trip." "Wait, you are not upset, are you?" Sarah called after me. "You know how much I need this right now." I paused, one hand on the car door. For a moment, I considered telling them everything, how much this trip had meant to me, how carefully I had planned each detail with them in mind, how deeply their casual dismissal of my feelings had wounded me. But looking at their expectant faces, I knew they wouldn't truly hear me. They never had. "Goodbye," I said, simply sliding into the driver's seat and closing the door before they could respond. As I drove away, I caught a glimpse of them in my rearview mirror. Mom and Dad huddled together, Sarah continuing to load luggage, all of them already moving on with their plans. Plans that no longer included me. The drive back to my hotel passed in a blur. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, but I barely registered the discomfort. My mind raced with disjointed thoughts and raw emotions that I couldn't begin to process. I pulled into the hotel parking lot and sat motionless in the car, staring blankly through the windshield. The reality of what had just happened washed over me in waves. They had excluded me from my own gift. They had chosen Sarah over me. Yet again, they had expected me to finance their betrayal without complaint. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Amanda, my boss and occasional confidant. "How is the big surprise going? Are your parents over the moon?" The simple question broke something inside me. Tears that I had been holding back spilled down my cheeks as I typed a brief reply. They decided to take Sarah instead. Amanda's response was immediate. "What? Call me now." I wiped my face and dialed her number. "What do you mean they are taking your sister instead?" Amanda demanded without preamble. The entire story poured out of me, decades of accumulated hurt crystallizing into this final, unbearable rejection. Amanda listened without interruption, allowing me the space to articulate feelings I had suppressed for years. "Delia," she said when I finally fell silent. "I am so sorry. What they did was incredibly hurtful and thoughtless. The worst part is that they don't even realize how hurtful it was," I replied, my voice rough from crying. "To them, it was just a practical solution to Sarah's latest crisis." "So what happens now?" Amanda asked gently. "Will you cancel the reservations?" The question startled me. In my emotional state, I hadn't considered the practical aspects of the situation. All the bookings were in my name, paid for with my credit card. I could cancel everything with a few phone calls. But as tempting as that momentary revenge might be, I knew it wasn't the right course of action. "No," I said finally. "I won't cancel. That would just confirm what they already believe about me, that I'm selfish and unfeeling compared to sensitive Sarah." Then what will you do? A plan began to form in my mind, not born from a desire for revenge, but from a need to finally acknowledge my own worth. I think it's time I stopped trying to buy their approval and started setting some boundaries instead. After ending the call with Amanda, I opened my laptop and got to work. First, I contacted the travel agent who had helped me plan the trip. I explained that there had been a change in the travel party, but I wanted to maintain most of the reservations with some strategic modifications. I need to change the names on the bookings, I began, and I want to adjust some of the experiences I had originally planned. For the hotel in Paris, I downgraded from the luxury suite with an Eiffel Tower view to a standard room. I canceled the private after-hours Louvre tour, but kept the Seine dinner cruise. The five-star restaurants remained booked, but I changed the reservations from special occasion celebration to standard dining experiences. In Rome, I kept the cooking class, but canceled the private Vatican tour, replacing it with a standard group tour. The luxury palazzo accommodations remained, but without the complimentary champagne and personalized welcome I had arranged. Barcelona underwent similar selective modifications. The architectural tour focusing on Gaudi's works remained intact, but the day trip to the vineyard was downgraded from a private experience to a small group excursion. For each special experience that remained, I added a note to be delivered to my family. Courtesy of Delia, enjoy. My final touch was a letter to be delivered to their hotel room upon arrival in Paris. Mom, Dad, and Sarah. By now you've begun your European adventure. This trip was meant to be a shared experience, a chance for us to create new memories together. While circumstances changed, I still want you to enjoy the journey I planned with such care. Some experiences have been adjusted, but many remain as I originally envisioned them. Each was chosen with specific memories and conversations in mind. The cooking class in Rome, Dad's interest in Roman architecture, Mom's collection of landmark magnets. This trip was meant to be a gift of love, not an attempt to buy your approval. I realize now that I've spent too many years seeking validation that should have been freely given. That ends today. I hope you enjoy Europe. I hope it expands your horizons and brings you joy. And I hope that somewhere between Paris and Barcelona, you'll take a moment to consider what it means to truly value someone. Safe travels, Delia. With each adjustment to the itinerary, I felt a curious lightening in my chest. For the first time in my life, I was acknowledging the pain of being the less favored child without either accepting it as my due or raging helplessly against it. I was setting boundaries quietly but firmly. As a final step, I booked myself a last-minute vacation to a beachfront resort in St. Lucia. If I couldn't have my European adventure, I would create a different kind of experience, one focused entirely on my own well-being. That evening, as my family boarded their flight to Paris, I sat on the balcony of my hotel room with a glass of wine watching the Kansas City sunset. My phone remained silent, no calls or texts from my parents checking on me or expressing any second thoughts. Their silence confirmed what I already knew. In their minds, they had made the right decision, and my feelings were an afterthought if they were considered at all. Yet for the first time since leaving that driveway, I felt at peace. I had spent a lifetime seeking approval from people who were constitutionally incapable of giving it to me. That pursuit was over. Whatever relationship we would have going forward would be on new terms with new boundaries that protected my sense of self-worth. Tomorrow I would fly to St. Lucia and begin a different kind of journey, one focused on healing rather than seeking validation from those who had always withheld it. But tonight I allowed myself to fully feel the grief of letting go of a lifetime of expectations, hopes, and illusions about my place in my family. My first morning in St. Lucia dawned with brilliant sunshine streaming through the curtains of my beachfront bungalow. I had arrived late the previous evening, too exhausted from travel and emotional turmoil to do more than collapse into bed. Now, as I stepped onto my private terrace overlooking the Caribbean Sea, the contrast between this peaceful setting and the chaos of the previous days struck me forcefully. I spent that first day in quiet contemplation, walking along the beach, swimming in the crystal clear water, and beginning the process of untangling my complicated feelings about my family. The resort offered a spa package, and I indulged in a massage that released some of the physical tension I had been carrying in my shoulders and neck. On my second day, I received an unexpected text from the tour guide in Paris. "Your family has arrived safely, delivered your letter as requested. They seemed quite surprised." I smiled faintly, imagining their reactions. They would be jet-lagged and disoriented, standing in a standard hotel room rather than the luxury suite I had originally booked, reading my carefully worded letter. Would they understand the message I was trying to convey, or would they simply focus on the practical adjustments to their itinerary? Later that day, I received my first text from Sarah. "Hotel room is smaller than I expected, but Paris is amazing. Thanks for setting this up." No acknowledgement of my absence, no recognition of what this trip was supposed to have been. Just Sarah accepting what was given to her as her due, as she always had. I didn't respond. Over the next few days, I established a rhythm in St. Lucia. Mornings spent journaling on my terrace, afternoons exploring the island, or lounging by the pool, evenings enjoying quiet dinners at the resort's restaurant. I made a conscious decision not to check my work email, giving myself a true break for perhaps the first time in my adult life. Occasional updates from the tour guides and concierges I had worked with kept me informed of my family's journey. They visited the Louvre on their own rather than with the private guide I had originally arranged. They took the Seine dinner cruise, where my mother apparently became emotional upon receiving the note that it was courtesy of me. They attended the cooking class in Rome, where my father asked the chef to take a photo of them to send to me, a gesture that fell somewhere between thoughtful and oblivious. On their 5th day abroad, when they were in Rome, I received a text from my father. "Delia, this trip is extraordinary. We had no idea how much thought you put into planning these experiences. The letter you left us has given us a lot to think about." It was the first acknowledgement of what had happened, though still dancing around the core issue. I read it several times before composing a brief reply. "I'm glad you're enjoying Europe." That evening, I received a longer message from my mother. "Darling, the cooking class today was magical. The chef taught us to make pasta from scratch, and all I could think was how much you would have enjoyed it. I realize now that we've made a terrible mistake. This trip was meant to be with you. Sarah is enjoying herself, but even she has mentioned several times that you should be here instead." Again, I waited before responding, considering my words carefully. "I appreciate you saying that. Enjoy the rest of your trip." I wasn't ready to absolve them with easy forgiveness. The pattern was too established, the hurt too deep. Any meaningful change would require more than a few apologetic texts sent from the midst of a vacation I had planned and paid for, but was not experiencing myself. On my 5th day in St. Lucia, I met an older woman named Eleanor at the resort's beachfront yoga class. Something about her calm demeanor and thoughtful questions drew me to accept her invitation for coffee afterward. "You seem to be carrying a heavy weight for someone on vacation," she observed, as we sat at a small table overlooking the water. Normally, I would have deflected such an observation with a pleasant denial, but something about Eleanor's direct yet compassionate manner broke through my usual reserve. I found myself sharing the condensed version of what had brought me to St. Lucia alone instead of Europe with my family. Eleanor listened attentively, nodding occasionally. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment before speaking. "You know I was the Sarah in my family," she said finally. "The younger sister who always needed rescuing, always had a crisis that required attention. It took me until I was in my 50s to realize what that dynamic had cost, not just my sister, but me as well." "What do you mean?" I asked, surprised by her perspective. "By allowing me to remain in a perpetual state of need, my parents robbed me of the opportunity to develop resilience and self-sufficiency. They thought they were protecting me, but they were actually preventing me from growing up." She sipped her coffee thoughtfully. It took my sister cutting off financial support and setting firm boundaries for me to finally face my own capabilities. "What happened with your sister?" I couldn't help asking. "We didn't speak for nearly 2 years," Eleanor admitted. I was furious with her for what I saw as abandonment, but eventually I built a life on my own terms. When we reconnected, it was as equals for the first time. Now she's my closest friend. The conversation with Eleanor stayed with me throughout the day. I had never considered how the family dynamic might be limiting Sarah as much as it hurt me. By consistently playing the role of the strong, independent daughter who didn't need support, I had perhaps inadvertently reinforced Sarah's position as the fragile one who couldn't function without it. On my last day in St. Lucia, as I packed for my return to New York, I received a flurry of texts from my family. They had reached Barcelona, the final leg of their journey, and seemed to have spent considerable time discussing me. From Sarah. "Delia, I've been doing a lot of thinking on this trip. I never realized how much I've relied on Mom and Dad, or how that's affected you. I'm sorry for taking your place on this vacation. You deserve to be here." From Dad. "The guide today told us how you specifically requested information about Roman architecture for me. Every detail of this trip shows how well you know us and how much thought you put into making it special. We've taken you for granted for too long." From Mom, the longest message. "Darling, we're sitting at a cafe in Barcelona, and I can't stop thinking about how you should be here with us. Your letter has sparked many difficult conversations between the three of us. Sarah has admitted that she's been depending on us too much, and your father and I have had to face some hard truths about how unfairly we've treated you over the years. We've failed you as parents, and I don't know if you can forgive us, but we would like the chance to make amends when we return." Their words affected me more deeply than I expected. Sitting on my terrace, watching my final Caribbean sunset, I allowed myself to feel cautiously hopeful. Words were easy, especially when prompted by the generosity of a luxury vacation. The real test would come when they returned home, when old patterns and habits reasserted themselves. I didn't respond immediately to their messages. Instead, I finished packing and prepared for my early morning flight. As I drifted off to sleep, I realized that regardless of what happened with my family going forward, something fundamental had shifted within me. I had finally acknowledged my own worth not as the perfect daughter or successful career woman, but as a person deserving of love and respect simply for being who I am. 1 week after returning from St. Lucia, I sat nervously in a quiet corner table at a restaurant near my parents' house. They had called upon their return from Europe, asking to see me in person. After some hesitation, I had agreed to meet them for dinner during a weekend trip to Kansas City. I arrived early, ordering a glass of wine to calm my nerves as I waited. I had spent the week since my return from St. Lucia processing my feelings and considering what kind of relationship I wanted with my family moving forward. The clarity I had found in the Caribbean remained, but actually facing my parents and sister would test my resolve. They arrived together looking tanned from their European adventure, but subdued. Dad spotted me first and nudged Mom and Sarah toward my table. There was an awkward moment as they approached, none of us quite sure how to greet each other after everything that had happened. Mom broke the tension, stepping forward to embrace me tightly. "Delia, thank you for agreeing to meet with us." We settled into our seats, ordering drinks and making small talk about my flight and the weather, carefully avoiding the real reason for our meeting until after the waiter had taken our food orders and left us alone. Dad cleared his throat, always the one to address difficult topics directly. "Delia, we owe you an apology. What we did taking Sarah on the trip you planned instead of you was thoughtless and hurtful." "It was worse than that," Mom added, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "It was the culmination of years of taking you for granted, of expecting you to be the strong one who didn't need our support or attention." I took a sip of my wine, trying to maintain my composure. "Yes, it was," I agreed simply. "Your letter really made us think," Dad continued. And then experiencing the trip, seeing all the thoughtful details you included, understanding how much care went into planning each experience specifically for us. His voice trailed off. We realized that we've been perpetuating a dynamic that has been unfair to both you and Sarah, Mom said. By always treating you as the one who didn't need us, and Sarah as the one who couldn't function without us, we've done a disservice to you both. I glanced at Sarah, who had remained uncharacteristically quiet. She met my eyes, her expression more mature and solemn than I could remember seeing it. "I've been selfish," she said finally. "I never stopped to consider what it felt like for you always being expected to be the perfect one while I got attention and help for every little problem. The trip opened my eyes to a lot of things, including how I've been using Mom and Dad as a crutch instead of developing my own strength." Their words were everything I had wanted to hear for years, but I approached them with caution. "I appreciate what you're all saying, but this pattern has been established for decades. It won't change overnight." "We know," Dad acknowledged. "That's why we've all agreed to make some concrete changes." Mom reached across the table to take my hand. "Sarah has found a new job and she's moving into her own apartment next month. No more financial support from us unless it's a genuine emergency. And I'm starting therapy," Sarah added, "to work on my dependency issues and learn to stand on my own feet. We've also been discussing how we can rebuild our relationship with you," Dad said. "We know we've missed so much of your life by keeping you at arm's length, making assumptions about what you needed or wanted based on the role we assigned you in our family." "We'd like to visit you in New York," Mom suggested tentatively. "See your life there, meet your friends, understand the world you've built for yourself, if you're willing to have us, of course." I felt tears pricking at my eyes, despite my best efforts to maintain composure. "I'd like that," I admitted. "But I need you to understand something. I can't go back to being the daughter who accepts scraps of attention and convinces herself that's enough. I deserve more than that." "You absolutely do," Dad agreed emphatically. "And we want to give you that if you'll let us try." The conversation continued through dinner, touching on painful memories, but also finding moments of genuine connection that felt new and promising. We agreed to start with small steps, weekly video calls, instead of brief Sunday check-ins. My parents' visit to New York in the fall, more honest communication about our feelings and needs. As the evening drew to a close, Sarah surprised me by asking if I would walk with her to her car. Once outside, she turned to me with unexpected vulnerability in her expression. "I want you to know that I understand what I took from you," she said quietly. "Not just the trip, but years of attention and support that should have been shared equally. I can't give that back to you, but I can stop perpetuating the pattern going forward." "That's all I've ever wanted," I replied honestly, "for us all to see each other clearly and treat each other with genuine respect." And she hesitated, then asked, "Do you think we could ever have a real sister relationship? The kind where we actually support each other instead of competing for Mom and Dad's attention?" The question touched something deep within me, a longing I had suppressed for years. "I'd like to try," I said. "It won't be easy, but I think it would be worth the effort." Sarah nodded, looking simultaneously relieved and determined. "I'd like that too." As I drove back to my hotel that night, I felt cautiously optimistic. One dinner couldn't erase decades of established patterns, but it was a meaningful first step. The boundaries I had set by altering their trip and expressing my feelings clearly had created space for something new to grow in our relationship. 1 year later, I found myself once again planning a family trip. This time it was a joint effort, a week in Costa Rica, with each of us contributing to both the planning and the cost. Sarah, now successfully employed and living independently, had researched eco-tours and wildlife experiences. Mom had found a beautiful rental house that could accommodate all of us. Dad had handled the logistical details of flights and transportation. My contribution was coordinating it all, applying the skills that had made me successful in my career to create an experience that would work for everyone. The difference this time was that I wasn't trying to buy their approval or prove my worth. I was simply sharing my talents as part of a collaborative family effort. Our relationships had evolved significantly over the past year. There had been setbacks, moments when old patterns reasserted themselves, but each time we had addressed them directly, rather than falling back into comfortable but harmful roles. Sarah had maintained her independence, working through challenges instead of expecting rescue. My parents had visited me in New York, making a genuine effort to understand and appreciate the life I had built. Our communications had become more honest, more balanced, and ultimately more rewarding. As I finished confirming the last details for our Costa Rica adventure, I reflected on how much had changed since that painful morning when I stood in my parents' driveway watching them choose Sarah over me one final time. The hurt of that moment would always remain a part of my story, but it no longer defined my understanding of my place in the family or my sense of self-worth. Sometimes the most precious gift we can give ourselves is not a luxury vacation or material success, but the courage to establish boundaries that protect our sense of self-worth. I had finally learned that lesson not through the European adventure I had so carefully planned, but through its unexpected aftermath. Life doesn't always unfold as we expect, but sometimes its detours lead us exactly where we need to go. I now know that true family bonds aren't built on one person constantly sacrificing for others, but on mutual respect, honest communication, and the willingness to grow together through difficult truths. If my story resonates with you, I would love to know your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to establish difficult boundaries with family members? Did it lead to positive change in your relationships? Please like and subscribe to hear more stories about navigating complex family dynamics and finding self-worth through challenging circumstances. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that you deserve to be valued for exactly who you are, not for what you can provide to others.